Hi, I'm Wame Jallow, and I'm on the mission to make Shuga Global the home for stories that move young people from awareness to action.
Today's episode is about Shuga, a 15-year storytelling brand that has helped young people talk about sex, HIV, violence, stigma, shame, and choice in ways institutions often cannot. And here's the number that changes the conversation. The World Bank estimated that every dollar invested in sugar could return up to $150 in health benefits. This is trust turned into behavior change, and behavior change turned into economic value. So I sit down today with Wame Jallow, Executive Director of Shuga Global, and Victor Orozco, Senior Economist at the World Bank Development Impact Department, to ask what sugar proves about story, culture, capital. Because if a brand can earn enough trust to change what people do, why are we still treating storytelling as the soft option? So, welcome, Wame and Victor, to the podcast. We're going to start talking a little bit about how Sugar was established as a trusted youth brand, not just as a TV show or a campaign. So, Wame, before we talk about Sugar as a show, a brand, or a set of numbers, can you tell me about one person or one moment that showed you Sugar had changed someone's life?
Oh, thank you very much, Miriam. What a beautiful question. And I get that all the time. I actually get a lot of young people coming up to me and saying, I watched Sugar when I was in university. Actually, I was at the Social Behavior Change Summit this last week. And we had a very powerful intervention by a young woman from Nigeria who came up to me and said, Sugar changed her life. She said, and her quote was, I didn't now need to go and live these experiences to find out about the positive and negative things in of life. I actually watched Sugar. I was able to see myself on screen. That's how she said. She's like, I could relate to those characters. They told my story. They looked like me. They had my culture. Everything about them related to my life. And so watching Sugar, it helped me get information. And then from there, I was able then to think about the choices that I wanted to make in my life. And we get that all the time. And I always say to young people, tell me what your sugar story is, because everyone has a beautiful sugar story to tell around how they were able to watch the show and how it impacted on the choices that they made going forward. So it's always really nice to hear stories of uptake in services, stories that of having courageous conversations with their teachers, their parents about sex, about alcohol, and also just being able to uptake services, be able to say, hey, I do want to make this choice that may change my life. Where do I have access to this particular medicine or commodity, or who do I need to go and talk to find out more information about this? Or here are the things that I'm struggling with. Here's the trust issues that I have. Here's the misinformation I'm seeing. What's true, what's not true, and how do we create conversations around that? So that's what I love about this, is that it really has been a conversation sparker for over 3 million young people, because that's been the reach globally.
Wow, I love it, love it, love it, love it. And so now, when did you actually realize that Sugar had stopped being just a show and just became a brand young people trusted? Was there a moment in the journey?
Yeah, so this. So maybe if I can also just share a little bit of history about Sugar. So we started off in Kenya in 2009, and that was a time when a lot of the programs on the ground. That's when HIV treatment access started. And what we immediately recognized was that we needed something to help guide conversations amongst to create dialogue, right, about these issues. So it's one thing to actually have drugs and commodities and services on the ground, but then you need to have generate demand. And you know this from a product point of view. If the product
Yeah.
sits on the shelf and nobody wants it, how do you generate the knowledge behind it, build a trust behind the brand, get people to actually use it as a tool to influence and inform change? So we knew we caught fire when, after leaving Kenya, it went Pan-African. A lot of young people throughout Africa recognized
Wow.
Sugar because they said, like, so for example, Love, Sex and Money, which was a done in Kenya in 2009, I saw it in Botswana in 2012. And I
Wow.
remember I was an evaluator at the time, and it was a program funded then by PEPFAR. And it was in a rural community hall where we were looking at uh, pre and post influence of sugar on young people, adolescents. And I was blown away myself as an evaluator then, because instantly young people raised their hands and said, "This is my story. I've lived through these things, just as you see in Love, Sex, and Money." And these are young people in the rural context. So it went on to create a global phenomenon. Not only did we do sugar in Kenya, but also in South Africa. We did it in sugar babi in Cote d'Ivoire, and sugar shed in India. And we really saw a huge number of people who watched it. But watching is one thing. What we saw, and then Victor will speak a little bit more to this in terms of from an impact perspective, is the engagement. The young people actually started having conversations about this. And I think is part of the amazing part of the sugar story is not just the reach, but the engagement that they were able to have and feel free that they had safe spaces to talk about sex, to talk about HIV, gender-based violence, issues that are very prevalent in their communities and in their context.
So the sugar name basically gives young people permission to talk about things in school, clinics, parents that institutions often cannot, right? That's
Correct.
basically
And also bridges
what the
dialogue.
yeah.
Yes. And
Yes.
also just to say, and bridge dialogue, because it's one thing
Okay.
to change the mindset of a young person, give them agency. It's another thing for them to go back into an environment where they're not able then to exercise those choices and shift norms and behavior. So what we've seen, the benefit of this is that they're able to actually watch the videos. The parents and the teachers secretly also watch the videos as well. And then they bridge the dialogue. You know, they're able to have courageous conversations between parents and teachers and young people about a lot of these topics. But it also recognizes the intersectionality of issues that young people contend with. I think people tend to think of topics in a very siloed approach. So if I'm talking about education, I'm purely talking about education. If I'm talking about livelihoods, it's purely just about livelihoods. The beauty of this is that sugar tells multiple stories, multiple themes, recognizing the day in the life of a young person. So you're able to talk about gender-based violence, gender equality issues, education, social empowerment, social and economic empowerment, all in one storyline. And that really brings up a diversity of conversations that young people have as a result of the sugar films.
Wow. So the story really, really matters, but the brand is what made young people really open the door. So I think the next question that we're going to get to, and I want to put Victor on the spot, is how do you actually measure this trust, right? So Victor, trying to put a price on the trust factor. So you tested this TV show almost the way a drug company would test a medicine, right? In plain language, what did you find?
Hi, Miriam. Yes. So basically, we use the same methods that a pharmaceutical would use, using randomized controlled trials, where we randomize individuals or groups into a treatment or to a control or placebo group, and then we run surveys. We measure behavioral objective outcomes before and after the intervention, to measure not the correlation, not the association, not the contribution, but purely the causal impact, the causal effect that the intervention had on your target audience, right? So several years ago, we did a randomized controlled trial of the Shuga TV drama. It was, I think, the first season in Nigeria. And this was co-authored with Eliana Laferrara and Abhijit Banerjee. The latter won the Nobel Prize for being one of the leaders of this randomista revolution, bringing randomized controlled trials into the development sector, right? And that trial basically showed that study participants, 18 to 24-year-old men and women, young men and women, that watched this third season that lasted around 3 hours, that 8 to 10 months later, we see substantial improvements on their knowledge about HIV transmission. They were twice as likely to get tested for HIV, and they were half as likely to gotten infected with chlamydia, a common sexually transmitted infection. Both the HIV testing and the chlamydia infection outcomes were not self-reported, were an objective measure that we collected, right? We also see a reduction of almost half of reported gender-based violence in our treatment group, right? And many more impacts. Now, we see that these effects were even larger for study participants that reported stronger character identification, connecting with the characters, right? But also among those who reported stronger transportation or program immersion. These two mechanisms of character identification and program immersion or transportation are very unique to storytelling, right? To entertainment media, something that, hey, an information only format will not be able to trigger such mechanisms. So yes, that's the evidence of this Shuga trial. So this is a very smart, cost-effective intervention. I'm talking about entertainment media when done by professionals like the Shuga team to change behaviors at scale.
You know, the number that stops people is this $150 return for every $1 spent. Now, what did that calculation include? And I know that you must have a conservative estimate out there. And what did it leave out?
In our cost benefit analysis, we took very conservative estimates. So we said, you know what? Let's just pick the 5 biggest media markets of Shuga in sub-Saharan Africa. And let's just choose one outcome, HIV testing. And let's assume, I think it was something like 5% of the target audience, just the 18 to 24-year-olds. Let's assume they watched the show. And then that this effect, we found that it doubled HIV testing, which was from 2 to 4% points, led for these individuals in this market to start HIV treatment. And this HIV treatment led them to live many more years, right? And this cost benefit, on the benefit side, basically we calculated the number of years the wages these young people would earn in 30 years, right? At the minimum wage. And that's how the benefits were calculated, very conservatively. On the cost side was the costing of producing this third season, which was around 2 million. So when we brought all that together, we found that, for every dollar that the Shuga cost, it brought in health benefits in terms of wages earned by these individuals that started HIV treatment and worked for 30 years, brought $150 in benefits. So extremely smart, cost-effective intervention, among the most cost-effective and scalable interventions for combating HIV
That's
in the world.
unbelievable, Victor. Does this actually capture what you see in community, or does it still miss something about the trust, the memory, the cultural change in their communities?
A lot of it is how we are able to then have these community dialogues to affirm what these numbers actually mean in real life. We always say put the human story behind the numbers. It's not just about giving graphs to the issues. And I think sometimes that's where, even from a policy making decision making entities, they struggle with understanding what is the issue. If you just put numbers, it's just a number. But when you start putting human faces and stories behind these numbers, that's when it really hits the point. So we're seeing these numbers really resonate to what we're seeing on the ground. So the one thing that I think the struggle that we have in the sector is it's not just about the building the awareness, is what is the action that a young person takes as a consequence of the knowledge that they've gained. And these kinds of evaluations help us do that, the funnel effect. It was a really fascinating, at the conference last week, somebody came up to us and said, you posted a clip in your latest Sugar Mashariki's series about self-injectables for family planning. That clip, when we took a segment of it and we put it on our digital media, reached 2.8 million views in a week, which is phenomenal. The story didn't just stop there. They went on to say they got a massive surge in requests for referrals to health services for family planning uptake. And then they also saw that there was a stock out of some of the contraceptives because a lot of young women now were saying, where do I go and get these commodities? So we're able to actually see the full story, not just from the message, but how the actual behavioral outcome happened in the sense of somebody uptaking services as well. So it's a beautiful story to tell and be able to see this chain of effect.
Victor, if a commercial youth brand had this level of trust, recall, reach, return, love, brand loyalty, brand love, we would call it an asset. And if it was selling products that we can immediately see an uptake on, we'd all be wanting to invest, right? Now, why are storytelling products like sugar still treated like a communication add-on or the poor cousin of any donor-funded content of public health programs?
I think it's, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of inertia, right, in organizations, which means keep investing in things like, information only formats and give less of a chance to innovations like these powerful TV dramas like Sugar. And for that, the strengthening the evidence base helps a lot to say, hey, this is a very smart investment. We should be doing more and more of that. And I think the World Bank, from a low baseline, has invested more and more in soap operas. But evidence alone is not going to change things, right? You need also new financial instruments, right? Where you can combine not only the public funding, the foundation philanthropic funding that usually, invest in innovations, pilots, research, technical assistance. But also, I think we will need new collaborations with the private sector, right? Through blended finance models that could use some public philanthropic funding to de-risk investments from the private sector so they can come in at a larger scale for producing more Sugas, right? More Ted Lassos, let's say, of the world. I think also we need more systematic collaboration between the public and private sector. And in addition to funding, I think we need more forums where we explore and workshops where we explore specific collaborations for specific projects. So if a development bank is financing a massive behavior change communication for girl education, um, see how they can work with entertainment media sector, both from their more foundation side, but also the commercial side, to reach a new scale, right? And let me give you a quick example. The Discovery Learning Alliance, the foundation of Discovery Channel, now they're called Impact International. They've been producing this amazing entertainment media edutainment production that aims to increase aspirations and promote girl education. Now, that program broadcasted in many channels, but also inside schools, right? We did a randomized control trial and found that it substantially increased school enrollment and improved learning when matched with smartphones, right? That had gamified literacy games, apps. So the collaboration there entailed, right, marketing insight, telecoms because of the smartphones, broadcasters, an expert on producing this entertainment media, not, I would say, non-traditional partners for this more traditional behavior change communications. But like Shuga, I think this other production are great examples of what could be done at scale. And I think again, a new financial instruments like blended finance, new
Yeah.
forums, workshops, working on specific projects to use development finance, but also the know-how of the marketing, the private sector, the entertainment media. I think would be super interesting to do more and more.
But now, Wame, let's talk about the fact that you're now independent of Paramount, right? Where you've been in the room with funders or partners. What has been the real blockage, right?
Yeah, I mean, so I would say that we and it's something that even Victor and I and other partners got on the road and did a bit of a road show, was educating our donors about what the importance of this work actually looks like and what the outcomes would be. I wouldn't say that they're risk averse. I think it's just probably not understanding how much power we are able to harness with having so many captive audiences of young people in the room. What could you do with that? It's really powerful, as you said. I think the big issue here is that the sector itself is being slowly defunded. You know, there's more emphasis on service delivery, on access and commodities.
Yeah.
But as Victor was saying very well, you can't have a scale up of the services if you're not bringing people along the way and informing them and creating agency within the community. And I think that is the big part of it, demand generation side. So the work is being defunded. The sector is being defunded as a whole. We saw massive cuts last year in 2025. And the prioritization of then the funds, once they were available, went to service and commodities, which we can't contend against. People need services, they need commodities, they need medicine. However, in order for people to uptake those services, those programs, they need health messaging, right? And so this is where the wrestle, I think, sometimes is for us in the space is how we actually create agency within the donors to say it's important for this work to continue, because otherwise all these big goals you have programmatically on ending HIV and AIDS, increasing girls' education, ending early child marriage, et cetera, ending gender-based violence, et cetera, won't be achieved if you don't shift norms and shift behaviors amongst young people. Now, there are a handful of funders. The reality is that there's a handful of funders who are funding this type of work. And even that is scaling down significantly. And so where we are at the moment is, as Victor said very well, ecosystem building, pulling together partnerships in a very unique and different way, recognizing that everybody's coming to the table with a potential comparative advantage. So yes, private sector, which is important because again, private sector wields the power of masses, the numbers, the people. I mean, I used to work for the Botswana Business Coalition on HIV and AIDS. It was a private sector who actually made the business case in Botswana to start the ARV program. And that was really powerful because they recognized that without having knowledge, information, services for HIV and AIDS, the population, the production, the ability to get people to actually uptake services will be very poor. So there is a value in us bringing this work together and seeing how we can unlock further potential funding opportunities within donors, but we need to package the business case. So I wouldn't say it's risk averse. I think part of it is how we're speaking to what this work, the power of this work and the opportunity that it presents on all fronts, both from a donor perspective, yes, private sector, but even government as well, to the party.
But just for 1 second, let's talk about how risky can a soap opera get. I mean, it's pretty, nobody gets in trouble for funding a pamphlet, right? But, in order to really touch the hearts and the minds of young people, you need to be risky and you need to tackle it in a way that speaks to them, right? And of course, the soap opera of 10 years ago is not the soap opera of today. We're now dealing with much with different issues, like we're dealing with, the way we're dealing with obviously minorities, the way we're dealing with, LGBTQ, where we are today. I mean, I think there's a lot of very interesting ways in which, of course, films is moving, and I guess so is sugar. Can you talk to me a little bit about any sorts of risks that you have faced that have made it difficult at times, or questioned a little bit on how risky you need to make it, yet you know that that's what really links the hearts and the minds?
Yeah, no, that's a very, very powerful question, Miriam, and I think really important. I mean, the one thing that we're contending with is censorship. This is media that's going out on television. There are
Yeah.
age restrictions, obviously, and if you're putting it in like terrestrial television, broadcast television. So those are the I think the tricky elements of this is the fine bounds between telling the truth as it is and demonstrating the lived experiences of young people. And really having, I mean, most of our sugar drama series are very cutting edge in the type of content. And that's because it's authentic storytelling, it's relatable storytelling, it's telling the reality, the lived experiences of the youth on the ground. And so censorship is always, I think, one of the things that we always are fearful of. But we navigate that. I think as well, we try and educate the film commission and industry as well to say, these are the stories. And if we're not the ones telling the stories, young people are now very apt and adaptive to creating content themselves as well. So finding the platforms that can be able to show our shows is important. So we have a digital approach as well as having as well a television approach. And that's also recognizing that the audiences get the information from anywhere. It's like, so it's multifaceted. You have those who get it from the social media, others get it from television, others get it from print. And so we try and vary up our content to be able to create more exposure, more platforms for that reach to happen as well. But yeah, it is quite a thing where like for example, the fact that you have this podcast on sex, alcohol, and soap is powerful in and of itself. I mean, big shout out to you, Myriam, and your team for putting it together, because I feel like that's what young people want to hear. They want us to stop being quiet about our words that we use, and just really let's talk about sex if we need to. Let's show what sex means. Let's show the risks, but also let's show the potential of educating young people around making healthier decisions around sex, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a matter of giving them the information and being bold to tell these stories and shifting these norms. Yeah.
On this point of risk taking, so when we did the study, the Sugar team was kind enough to share with us the script of what they were going to be producing, right? And that we would be evaluating. And we're a bunch of economists, right? Our thing is doing evaluations, not script writing and the like. And we thought this is going to have the opposite effect. It's a lot of sex and rock and roll here, right? And then the Suga script writers told us, like, look, if you want eyeballs, you need sex and rock and roll. And if you want to hide the educational message so you don't sound like this preachy PSA, which a lot of our research and our other show could backfire, you also need sex and rock and roll. So, okay, cool. The trial showed that 8 to 10 months later, that the Sugar scriptwriters know what they were doing, and maybe the Economist didn't know what they were suggesting in terms of script writing. But that also tells you that the importance of these partnerships, right? Where we have researchers working with these organizations to do evaluations, content analysis using AI tools, et cetera, but let the script writers do their work, right? Because they know how to reach the hearts and minds, but also they know how to reach the eyeballs, something that us economists probably would suck at.
Wame, in just one sentence, why should this be funded as serious infrastructure, not a soft communication add-on?
We have the responsibility of ensuring that we can build up this creative economy sector for young people. So this is no longer a nice to have. This is a must in order to be able to get our youth population to survive the next phase of what's coming up. And I think it would be powerful for us to say in this generation that we've given that opportunity.
Fabulous, fabulous. And Victor, in one sentence, what's the status quo costing us?
It's costing us a lot of unnecessary HIV infections, violence against women, child marriages, and many, many more global challenges, issues. So we need to scale up such partnerships for reaching meeting these global challenges.
Fabulous. No, thank you so much, Wame and Victor, for your time, for the work that you've done over the decades on sugar and evaluating it, and for helping make the business case for this story, the trust and the behavior change, which is so unique. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow on your chosen listening platform. While you are there, share your thoughts, give us a 5-star rating, please, and share the podcast with a friend or a colleague. We deeply appreciate your support. I'm Professor Myriam Sidibé, and this podcast is brought to you by Brands on a Mission, helping organizations and brands achieve social impact and business growth through purpose. Head over to brandsonamission.com to find out more about our work.
Hi, I'm Wame Jallow, and I'm on the mission to make Shuga Global the home for stories that move young people from awareness to action.